What if the reason your prayers feel powerless isn't because God is silent, but because you've never truly learned how to pray from the place He's been waiting for? Something hidden is blocking your breakthrough, and tonight, it's about to be exposed. There is a moment in your life when everything still looks normal on the outside, but something inside you has quietly gone cold. You still pray, but your words feel empty. You still believe, but your faith feels distant, like an echo instead of a fire. And deep down, you begin to wonder, what happened to the passion you once had? What happened to the presence you used to feel so strongly? What if I told you that this dryness is not the end of your spiritual life, but the beginning of something deeper, something more real than anything you have experienced before? Because there is a kind of silence that is not abandonment. There is a distance that is not rejection. Sometimes, when God feels quiet, it is not because He has left you, but because He is drawing you into a place where surface-level faith can no longer survive. A place where routine prayers are no longer enough. A place where you stop performing and start seeking. And that is where everything begins to change. Many people never realize this. They spend years repeating the same words, hoping for different results, wondering why their prayers feel powerless. They think the answer is to try harder, to speak louder, to be more disciplined. But the truth is far more unsettling and far more freeing. The problem is not that God is not listening. The problem is that something within us has lost connection with the very source of life. There is a difference between saying prayers and truly praying. One comes from habit. The other comes from a place so deep within your soul that it cannot be faked. And when that place is awakened, everything shifts. But here is the part most people avoid. Before that awakening comes, there is often a breaking. A moment where you realize that your strength is not enough, that your understanding is limited, that your ability to sustain your own faith has quietly failed you. And instead of running from that realization, what if that is exactly where you are meant to stay? Because it is in that place, where pride falls, where control slips away, where certainty is stripped down, that something sacred begins to form. Not a louder version of your old prayers, but an entirely new kind of connection. One that is not built on emotion alone, but on surrender. This is where many turn back. It feels uncomfortable. It feels unfamiliar. It feels like losing something instead of gaining. But what if what you are losing is exactly what has been holding you back? What if the version of faith you have been holding on to is too small for where God is trying to take you? There is a deeper way to pray, not just with words, but with your spirit. Not just asking, but aligning. Not just speaking, but listening. And the doorway into that place is not found in effort. It is found in surrender. But surrender is not easy. It requires you to release control over outcomes, over timing, over understanding. It asks you to trust even when you cannot see. And for many, that is where fear begins to rise. Because when you stop controlling, you start confronting. You confront the doubts you have been hiding, the fears you have been ignoring, the wounds you thought time had healed but are still quietly shaping your faith. And suddenly, prayer is no longer just a spiritual routine. It becomes a mirror, a place where everything real comes to the surface. And that can feel overwhelming. But what if that is exactly the point? What if prayer was never meant to be a place where you hide from truth, but a place where truth sets you free? Because the transformation you are longing for does not begin with perfect words. It begins with an honest heart, a heart that is willing to say, I don't have it all together. I don't understand everything, but I am here. And that kind of honesty, raw, unfiltered, real, is something heaven responds to. You may feel like you have lost something, like the fire is gone, like the connection is fading. But what if this is not loss? What if this is an invitation? An invitation to go deeper than you have ever gone before. Not into more activity, but into more intimacy. Not into louder words, but into a quieter, stronger faith. Because the truth is, God is not looking for perfect prayers. He is looking for a surrendered heart. And when that surrender begins, something powerful happens. Not instantly, not loudly, but deeply. Something begins to awaken. And if you stay, if you don't turn away from this moment, if you lean into it instead of escaping it, you may discover that what felt like an ending was actually the beginning of a faith that cannot be shaken. But to step into that, you must first be willing to let go of everything you thought prayer was and allow something far greater to take its place. There comes a point where you realize that knowing how to pray is not the same as truly being led in prayer. You can have the right words, the right structure, even the right intentions, and still feel like something essential is missing. It is subtle at first, a quiet awareness that your prayers are staying on the surface, never quite reaching the depth your soul is longing for. And in that moment, a question begins to rise within you, not loudly, but persistently. Who is really guiding your prayers? Because prayer was never meant to be a human effort reaching up to God. It was meant to be a divine movement within you, something initiated by the Spirit, something shaped beyond your natural understanding. And yet, so often, we approach prayer as if it depends entirely on us. Our focus, our discipline, our ability to say the right things at the right time. But there is a profound shift that happens when you begin to understand that you were never meant to carry the weight of prayer alone. The Holy Spirit is not a distant observer of your spiritual life. He is not waiting for you to perfect your words before He steps in. He is already present, already moving, already searching the deepest places of your heart, even the places you cannot fully access yourself. And when you become aware of this, everything about prayer begins to change. Because suddenly, prayer is no longer about trying to reach God. It becomes about allowing God to move within you. There are moments when you don't know what to say, moments when your thoughts are scattered, when your emotions are heavy, when your mind feels too tired to form even a single clear sentence. And in those moments, it can feel like you are failing spiritually, like you are falling short of what prayer should be. But what if those are the very moments where the Holy Spirit begins to pray in ways you never could? What if your weakness is not a barrier, but an invitation? Because there is a kind of prayer that does not begin in your mind. It begins in your spirit. It flows from a place deeper than language, deeper than logic. And the Holy Spirit is the only one who can access that place fully. He understands what you cannot articulate. He sees what you cannot perceive. He aligns your heart with the will of God in ways that go far beyond your natural capacity. This is why trying to control every part of your prayer life can actually keep you from experiencing its true power. Because control keeps you at the surface, but surrender takes you deeper. When you release the need to manage every word, every thought, every outcome, you create space for something divine to happen. You begin to listen instead of striving. You begin to sense instead of forcing. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your prayers begin to carry a different weight. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are no longer alone in the process. There is a sacred partnership that begins to form. Not you speaking to God from a distance, but God speaking and moving within you. And in that place, prayer becomes alive. It becomes dynamic. It becomes something that transforms you even as you are praying. But stepping into this kind of prayer requires trust. It requires you to believe that the Holy Spirit is truly present, truly active, truly willing to guide you, even when you cannot feel Him clearly. And that is where many hesitate, because we are so used to relying on what we can understand, what we can control, what we can measure. But the movement of the Spirit does not always follow those patterns. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is gentle. Sometimes it feels like nothing is happening at all. And yet, beneath the surface, something is being shaped, something is being aligned, something is being prepared. This is where faith begins to mature. Not when everything feels powerful and clear, but when you choose to remain in that place of trust, even when you do not fully understand what is happening. When you continue to show up, not with perfect words, but with an open heart. When you allow the Holy Spirit to lead, even if that leadership does not look the way you expected. And over time, something remarkable begins to take place. Your prayers start to shift from being self-centered to God-centered. From being reactive to being aligned. From being driven by fear to being rooted in trust. You begin to notice that you are no longer just asking for things. You are being changed in the process. Your desires begin to shift. Your perspective begins to expand. Your sensitivity to the presence of God begins to deepen. And this is the quiet miracle of Spirit-led prayer. It does not always announce itself with dramatic moments or overwhelming emotions. Sometimes it reveals itself in the smallest changes, the way you respond differently, the way peace begins to settle where anxiety once lived, the way clarity begins to emerge where confusion once dominated. And you realize that prayer is not just something you do. It is something that is shaping who you are becoming. But this transformation only happens when you are willing to release the illusion that you must lead your own prayers. Because the truth is, The most powerful prayers are not the ones you construct. They are the ones you allow the Holy Spirit to form within you. And when you begin to live in that reality, prayer is no longer a struggle to maintain. It becomes a place you are drawn to. A place where you are not performing, not striving, not pretending, but simply being, in the presence of God, led by His Spirit into something deeper than you ever thought possible. There is a hidden resistance that rises the moment you begin to move deeper into prayer, and it does not always appear in obvious ways. It does not always come as distraction or doubt. Sometimes, it comes disguised as delay, as heaviness, as an unexplainable reluctance to enter into the very place your soul knows it needs. You tell yourself you will pray later. You convince yourself that you are too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed. And slowly, without even realizing it, distance begins to grow again. But what if this resistance is not random? What if the very moment you feel the least desire to pray is the moment that matters the most? Because there is a real tension that exists when you begin to shift from surface-level faith into something deeper. Your spirit may be longing for more, spiritually numb, and so a deeper alignment begins to form. Not forced, not rigid, but natural. Your choices begin to reflect your desire to remain close. Your thoughts begin to shift toward what is true, what is life-giving, what is aligned with God's heart. And in this process, you start to understand that intimacy is not just about feeling close to God. It is about living in a way that sustains that closeness. Because relationship requires response. It is one thing to encounter God in moments of prayer. It is another thing to carry that awareness into the way you speak, the way you think, the way you respond to others, the way you handle pressure, disappointment, and uncertainty. And this is where prayer begins to shape your life in visible ways. You begin to pause before reacting. You begin to listen more deeply. You begin to sense a quiet prompting within you, sometimes guiding, sometimes correcting, sometimes simply reminding you of truth in the middle of confusion. And this inner awareness becomes more valuable than any external validation, because you are no longer living from impulse. You are living from connection. But this connection is not automatic. It must be protected, not through fear, but through intentionality, through a willingness to guard your time, your focus, your inner space. Because the world around you will constantly compete for your attention. It will pull you into noise, into distraction, into patterns that slowly erode the sensitivity you have developed. And if you are not careful, what once felt clear can become distant again. This is why remaining close requires awareness. An awareness that recognizes when something is shifting, when your attention is drifting, when your desire is weakening. Not to condemn yourself, but to gently return. Again and again, without shame, without delay. Because the beauty of this relationship is that God does not withdraw the moment you falter. He remains. And every time you return, you are reminded that this connection is not based on perfection, but on presence. Not on your ability to maintain it flawlessly, but on your willingness to come back when you drift. And over time, this returning becomes less frequent. Not because you have become perfect, but because your heart has been trained to remain, to stay aware, to stay connected, to stay responsive. And this is where prayer becomes something far greater than a practice. It becomes a way of living, a constant awareness that you are not alone, that you are being led, guided, shaped in ways that go beyond what you can see. And this awareness begins to anchor you, especially in moments of uncertainty. When decisions feel unclear, you do not panic as quickly. When circumstances shift, you are not shaken as deeply. When challenges arise, you do not feel as lost. Because you have learned to recognize a presence that is steady, even when everything else is not. And this is the quiet strength of intimacy. It does not always remove difficulty, but it changes how you walk through it. It gives you a sense of grounding that cannot be explained by external conditions. A confidence that is not rooted in outcomes, but in relationship. And from that place, something even more powerful begins to emerge. Trust. Not a forced belief that everything will work out the way you expect, but a deep assurance that no matter what happens, you are not navigating it alone. That there is wisdom available to you, guidance accessible to you, peace that can meet you even in uncertainty. And this trust reshapes the way you pray. You no longer come from a place of desperation alone. You come from a place of connection. You still ask, you still seek, you still bring your needs. But underneath it all, there is a foundation that holds you steady. A knowing that you are heard, that you are seen, that you are being led. And when prayer reaches this place, it is no longer something you struggle to sustain. It becomes something you cannot live without. Because you have discovered that what you were searching for was never just answers. It was Him. There is a moment, after everything has been stripped back, after the striving has quieted, after the resistance has been faced, and the hidden places have been revealed, when something settles within you with a depth you have never known before. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. But it is unmistakably real. A quiet, unshakable awareness that you are no longer the same person who began this journey. And in that moment, you begin to understand something that changes everything. Prayer was never meant to be a tool you use to get through life. It was meant to be the place where your life is continually transformed. Because what has happened within you is not temporary. It is not dependent on a feeling or a specific moment. It is something that has taken root. Something that will remain, even when circumstances change, even when emotions rise and fall, even when life becomes uncertain again. You have learned how to return. And that changes the way you face everything. There was a time when challenges would have shaken you, when uncertainty would have overwhelmed you, when silence would have made you question everything. But now, there is a different response forming within you. Not because life has become easier, but because you have been anchored in something deeper than your circumstances. You no longer panic as quickly. You no longer search frantically for answers in every direction. Instead, there is a quiet turning inward, a reflex of the soul that knows where to go, that knows where peace is found, that knows where truth can be heard even when everything else feels unclear. And this is the fruit of everything you have walked through. Not perfection, not constant clarity, but stability. A groundedness that cannot be easily shaken because it is not built on external conditions. It is built on a relationship that has been tested, refined, and strengthened over time. But this is not where the journey ends. Because what you have received was never meant to remain only within you. There is a world filled with people who are standing where you once stood. People who feel disconnected, uncertain, searching for something they cannot fully define. People who are repeating the same patterns, asking the same questions, feeling the same quiet emptiness you once felt. And now, you carry something they need. Not because you have all the answers, but because you have walked the path. You have experienced the shift. You have encountered the difference between surface-level faith and something real, something alive, something sustaining. And that gives your life a new kind of purpose. Not a pressure to perform, but an invitation to reflect. To live in a way that reveals what is possible. To speak from a place of experience, not theory. To carry a presence that others can sense, even before you say a word. Because transformation is never meant to be hidden. It is meant to overflow. And this does not always happen through grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it happens in the smallest ways. In the way you respond with patience instead of frustration. In the way you carry peace into situations that would have once unsettled you. In the way you listen, the way you speak, the way you remain steady when others are overwhelmed. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are not. They are evidence. Evidence that something real has taken place within you. Evidence that your connection with God is not just something you talk about, but something that shapes how you live. And people notice. Not always immediately, not always openly, but something in them recognizes the difference. And in a world that is often filled with noise, confusion, and instability, that kind of presence stands out in a way that words alone never could. But there is something important to remember as you step into this. You are not called to carry this in your own strength. The same Spirit who led you into this depth is the same Spirit who will continue to guide you forward. The same presence that sustained you in private will sustain you in public. The same grace that met you in your weakness will continue to meet you in every new challenge. So you do not have to strive to maintain what has been built. You simply have to remain. Remain aware. Remain connected. Remain responsive. Because everything flows from that place. And there will still be moments where you feel stretched, where new challenges arise, where deeper layers are revealed. But now, those moments no longer feel like threats. They feel like invitations. Invitations to go deeper still. To trust more fully. To surrender more completely. Because what you have discovered is not the end of the journey. It is the foundation for everything that comes next. And as you continue forward, There is one truth that will anchor you through every season, every challenge, every unknown path ahead. You are not walking alone, not in your strength, not by your understanding, not through your own effort, but led, sustained, and transformed by the presence of God within you. And when you live from that place, everything changes. Not all at once, not in ways the world always recognizes, but in a way that is deeper, stronger, and more lasting than anything you could have imagined. Because the greatest transformation was never meant to happen around you. It was always meant to happen within you.